Hello, everypony. This is Nightlife again, reading you An Affliction of the Heart, Volume 1, Plans, by an anonymous Pegasus. I know it's been a long time, and I'm very sorry, but work and life and busted equipment and lack of money have left me without the ability to record. But luckily, I've recently purchased this lovely Blue Yeti, brought on by a semi-suggestion from Deep Reader 313. Go give him a look. He's very good. Now, on to the story. Kuno stared glumly into the mirror, batting at her ball, watching the way it rocked back and forth. Oh, bell, sorry. It's bell, not ball. Watching the way it rocked back and forth, its negligible weight barely permeable. Still, she couldn't hear it. A collection of books lay scattered about her, left where she had thrown them when she was done reading them. Some of them she had even read twice, but already she was bored with that. She had always been a fast reader, and the collection of short stories had barely given her a few hours' amusement. It was amazing how slowly time could pass when one had nothing to do. Kuno had already tried to change her form once, and it failed. The pain in her injured ears told her that they were nowhere near being fully healed yet, and that was a good sign, she felt. If her ears were still healing, then her hearing may yet return. The world was oddly bleak without noise. It was strange. She could still feel her heartbeat, her breathing, but they made no sound. That would just be the worst possible thing. The touch of a hoof at her shoulders made her jump, and she grit her teeth in surprise and dismay. She really needed to stop being snuck up on like that. Well, it's kind of hard when you can't hear a bloody thing now, is it? Turning, she found Warden standing behind her. For the first time since she had arrived, he wasn't wearing his guard armor. Underneath the armor, he was actually rather handsome, in a very unkempt way. His mane and tail were messy, and he had a rough look that was appealing without being too intimidating. He was an all-over white, and his blue mane was just the right hue to make him look stunning. Kuno had also noticed very quickly that his cutie mark was a trestle with vines growing up over it. Not the cutie mark one would expect from a royal god. The changeling's mind began to work, pondering on this new piece of information. Why would a royal god have a cutie mark that pertained to gardening, of all things? Slowly the pieces clicked together in Kuno's mind. Warden's unwillingness to harm her, or see her harmed through his own actions. Not a trait that the royal god was exactly famous for. His garden, neat, tended, perfect. His stew, apparently home-cooked. The fact that he lived at the base of the mountains and not in the barracks. Then all the pieces fit neatly together in Kuno's mind. Warden was part of the reserve guard. The reserve guard was a contingent of the royal guard militia, normal ponies trained in the art of war to be called to service in times of emergency and martial law. Having changelings running free in the populace definitely counted as an emergency. So Warden, as part of the reserve guard, had been called to duty, but the Pegasus lacked the conviction to follow through with his orders, resulting in Kuno's current predicament. He couldn't let her roam free, but if he gave her up to the royal guards, she would be executed. Kuno was barely aware of Warden saying something to her, and she snapped back to reality with a blink. A piece of paper was thrust in front of her nose. Dinner time. Making sure that Warden could see, she nodded and then offered him her throat. Without a pause, the Pegasus clipped the tether onto her collar, and then locked it in place. A tug at the collar urged her to follow him, and she fell in behind the Pegasus, ears flayed black in a frown on her muzzle. She didn't much like being led around like a mule or some kind of pack animal. It was demeaning. In the back of her mind, Kuno was pondering her next move. Warden wasn't a true royal guard. He was a weekend warrior, a part-time badass. I love that one. Therefore, he would be more prone to mistakes, even though he hadn't made any glaring mistakes in her captivity so far. Once more, Kuno's tether was clipped to the iron ring, and then locked into place by a second padlock. Examining the tether itself, she found that it was tightly wound nylon. It would take hours to work a fray in a rope like that, not to mention a sharp surface. The smell of food broke her out of her train of thought, and the changeling turned towards the table, her stomach rumbling. Half a loaf of bread, and a bowl of stew was placed in front of her, and she fell to it with a ravenous hunger. Hot mouthfuls of bread and stew filled Kuno's mouth and belly, but she didn't even savor her but it didn't even sate her appetite. It was like drinking a cup of water while hunger gnawed at your stomach. It was something, but it made the hunger hurt. Are you okay? Kuno barely registered the words on the notepad in front of her face, and she groggily shook her head to try to clear it of a sudden gray fog. She didn't even recall falling to the floor, or passing out, or any of that. Warden was staring down at her, biting his bottom lip. The changeling blinked heavily, and then tried to push herself to her hooves, wincing. Her body was refusing to listen to her, and she barely had the strength to rise. A powerful hoof under her form helped her up, and she staggered in place as her balance failed her. "I'm fine," Kuno muttered, trying to push him away with the hoof. Her aim misjudged, sending her crashing to the floor again. This time she felt it. One of her already injured wings folded under her as she gave a weak cry of pain, trying to squirm it free and straight again. Oof, that must be painful. Powerful hooves wrapped around her midsection, and she squirmed against them futilely, just before allowing them to do what they would to her. Her head was swimming with hunger pangs that no normal food could sate, and each stab of need was like a knife in her side, being twisted and jerked side to side. Even breathing was beginning to hurt. Kuno couldn't help but wonder if this is what it felt like to die. The changeling barely registered the fact that she was being carried somewhere. The tether at her neck was unclipped, though the collar remained, with a heavy weight of the padlock swinging from it. She was carried through into a room she didn't recognize, and set down on a soft, warm bed with felt covers. Shifting feebly, Kuno tried to lift her head, only to have a hoof press her firmly back down. The hoof touched at her neck and at her hooves, as though searching for a pulse. "But base of the ears," Kuno said thickly, automatically, although a hazy grayness was sweeping into her vision. The hoof moved to the base of her ears, where the chitin was soft and flexible, allowing her heartbeat to be permeable. "I'm fine," Kuno muttered, trying to push herself to her hooves weakly. She would not allow this pony to see her weak. She was strong. If she was going to die of hunger, she was going to do it in a dignified fashion. But somewhere in the back of her mind, Kuno knew that this was only the start. The hunger would get worse from here on out. She had at least a week of agony left to live. "You are not fine," a gruff voice said, as though from a great distance. As the hoof held her down all the more firmly, placed over her shoulder so she couldn't move. The jingling of a bell, the muffled sound of chitin and fur against a felt bedspread. Sounds flooded the changeling's mind. She could hear again. Everything was muted, as though there were a thick plane of glass between her and the noises. But she could hear. Kuno relaxed then, going limp and just laying there, splayed out on her side, wings in disarray, as the Pegasus checked her over. "Goddesses! Why'd you have to show up in that bloody field?" The Pegasus growled, pulling back to stare at her, lips pursed and eyes narrowed. Kuno didn't look at Warden, didn't give him any indication that she had heard his words. Instead, she focused on the rest of the room, peering at her surroundings, without being able to do so. Wait, what? It was a clean room, neat and tidy, with a few furnishings here and there. There was a bookcase on one wall, a cupboard with an old spring-wound alarm clock, a potted flower of the yellow variety, and a single photograph framed in silver. It showed a younger Warden and a yellow earth pony female. The two of them were smiling, and looked happy. Warden caught her looking, and snapped the photo face downward with a scowl, growling in the back of his throat. "Just stay here," the pony said, waving a hoof in front of her nose to get her attention. When Kuno looked up at him, he mouthed the words, "Stay here," and pantomimed her remaining in place. Despite the gnawing pain in her stomach, Kuno had to resist the urge to giggle. The Pegasus moved back to the kitchen, leaving her alone. The muffled sounds of him moving were barely audible to her healing ears. But she knew she didn't have long. Casting her gaze about and racking her mind for what to do, Kuno used her dwindling strength to push herself to her hooves. A quick step and a short hop allowed her to grip the dresser and pull it down with her weight. Hop, skip, banana, jump, 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 jump. Sorry. The cupboard landed across her back as she fell under it. She cried out in pain, whimpering and trying to crawl free. The alarm clock hit the floor and shattered loudly, sending cogs and springs scattering all over the place. The pot plant was likewise shattered. Pot plant. Showering the floor with clots of dirt and bits of broken pottery. One of the drawers half opened and an assortment of seed packets spilled out, adding to the mess. Several long moments later, the cupboard was hefted off her, and powerful hooves once more lifted her from the floor. I'm fine. I'm fine. Kuno protested weakly, struggling and pushing at the Pegasus' chest feebly as best she could. Once again, the changeling was deposited on the ground, and Warden scowled at her. Warden left again, and Kuno didn't move this time. By the time he came back from the kitchen with a fresh bowl of stew, trying his best to spoon-feed her, Kuno had already hidden the spring she had purloined. She held it tightly at the base of her wing, where the weight of her wing itself would keep it lodged in place, safe and sound until she needed it. Oh, Kuno, you clever girl. By the way, who the bloody fuck has a spring-wound alarm clock in this day and age? Oh, wait. It's Equestria. Silly ponies. Now, where am I? Oh, yes, this is the end of this chapter. That was chapter 3 of An Affliction of the Heart Plans by an anonymous Pegasus. Go check that moaf out on Fiction. There are 3 more volumes and 13 more chapters to this one particular volume. And let's just say that, ladies and gentlemen, it gets good. And with that, I will leave you for tonight. A Night Life out.